Hey guys, tonight we travel back over 4,000 years to a land of sandstone and surprisingly sophisticated smiles. You find yourself blinking under a hazy Egyptian sunrise, the air thick with incense and river mist. Welcome to Saqqara, the necropolis of Memphis, and workplace of a man named Hizi, Ra, whose claim to fame might sound underwhelming until you realize he holds the title of the world's first recorded dentist. He's not famous like Tutankhamun or Cleopatra. No gold mask, no romantic drama. Just a guy who looked into mouths and, presumably, wasn't afraid of what he saw. You're his new apprentice, by the way. Congratulations. You're armed with nothing but a linen tunic, a faint sense of dread, and a mild hope that dentistry in 2600 BCE involves more wisdom than wires. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see how global this sleepy journey gets. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Hizi, Ra greets you with a nod that somehow radiates both wisdom and exhaustion. He's already dressed in finely pleated linen, his skin oiled, and a reed pen tucked behind one ear. His smile is intact, though it has that seen too many molars wariness. His house, or more accurately, his home clinic hybrid, is built of sun-baked mud brick, nestled in the dusty alleys near the royal necropolis. Inside, the scent of crushed mare mingles with the more intimate aromas of breath and barley. You're shown where to stand. Not sit, no, you haven't earned that yet, and you quietly marvel at a few curious implements laid out on a woven mat. Obsidian scalpels, bronze hooks, carved ivory wedges. There's even a bent copper pick that makes you sincerely hope it's not for what you think it's for. Hizi, Ra's first patient shuffles in, an older man with cheeks like papyrus and breath that suggests he's been chewing fermented onions in protest. As you observe, Hizi, Ra gently examines the inside of the man's mouth, muttering things you don't understand, but are too intimidated to question. He doesn't wear gloves. He doesn't use anesthesia. He just leans in like a man entirely at peace with gingivitis. Historians still argue whether dentistry back then was more about magic than medicine. But here in this dim, warm room, you watch as Hizi, Ra deftly applies a mixture of powdered lapis and crushed limestone to the man's sore gum. Not exactly Novocaine, but the patient sighs with relief or resignation. Hard to tell. While the next patient waits outside gnawing on a reed to keep calm, Hizi, Ra offers you a crust of date bread. You pretend to eat it, aware it's essentially a mouthful of sugar and ancient plaque. The irony isn't lost on you. You sneak a look at the back room, a wooden chest with papyrus scrolls, some with his name inked in black hieroglyphs. One scroll shows diagrams of molars and canines. Vaguely accurate, yet oddly artistic, like a child's drawing of a mouth after 2 cups of red dye. You learn that Hizi, Ra's full title isn't just dentist. His stele, still standing centuries later, lists him as Great One of the Dentists of the Palace and Chief of Scribes, among others. That's right, he's multitasking. Not only does he extract teeth, but he handles paperwork, possibly teaches hieroglyphs, and maybe even organizes temple events. Ancient LinkedIn would have loved him. A cat wanders through the open doorway. You both lock eyes. The cat seems to know something you don't. You choose to interpret its stare as a warning. Later in the day, a woman arrives holding her jaw. Through gestures and groans, it's clear she's in pain. Hizi, Ra inspects her molar, mutters to you about grit from barley grinding, and grabs what you hope is a tool and not a relic. With minimal fanfare and absolutely no consent forms, he performs a quick procedure you can barely watch. There's a pop, a hiss of pain, and then the woman actually smiles, sort of. A fringe theory suggests Hizi, Ra may have used mild analgesics, like opium from poppies or fermented figs. You don't see any around, but he does dab something sticky onto her gums. It smells like pine and regret. As the sun begins to drop behind the low skyline of Memphis, the heat fades, but the sound of distant flutes and workers calling out across the Nile rises. You sit on the step outside, watching Hazy Ra clean his instruments with a handful of sand and what might be a prayer. You try not to think about how many teeth have been handled today, or how many cavities still lurk in the jaws of the locals, or whether you'll ever be allowed to do more than observe. Your backache is from standing. Your mouth feels drier than the desert wind, but something about this ancient place, its rhythm, its strange blend of mysticism and medicine, draws you in. You look up. Hissy. Ra joins you, hand stained with whatever passed for antiseptic back then. He doesn't speak. He just nods at the stars, which are beginning to prick the indigo sky. And just like that, your first day as dental apprentice to the world's oldest known tooth dock ends. Your second day in ancient Saqqara begins before sunrise. The air carries a cool bite that won't last, and the streets are still mostly silent save for a rooster with a poor sense of pitch. You stretch on your reed mat, teeth gritty from sleep, and already you can hear Heezy, a rustling around inside the mud brick house. When you enter the clinic, he's already unrolling one of his prized papyrus scrolls. Today's cases, he informs you, or at least gestures vaguely, include a noblewoman with a gold tooth cap, and a fisherman with, quote, teeth like a crumbling temple. You nod solemnly, as though you're ready for this. You are not. There's no receptionist, no filing cabinet, just a faded wooden box filled with notched ivory tokens, each etched with a symbol you assume means. These are the ancient patient records, and they are interpretive at best. Easy. Ra doesn't seem to need much documentation, though. He claims to remember every patient by their breath alone. His tools are laid out in order of pointy to rusty. Obsidian blades used for delicate incisions, bronze tweezers for tooth shards, and a particularly menacing spoon-shaped scraper that makes you instinctively cover your own mouth. Historians still argue whether these implements were purely dental, or if they moonlighted as tools for embalming, punishment, or worse, baking. No one knows for sure. You're assigned scroll duty today, copying simple glyphs onto fresh papyrus using a reed pen dipped in soot ink. You manage tooth without trouble, but get stuck between molar and death. It's a fine line in this era. Mid-morning, a noblewoman arrives on a litter carried by 4 servants who look like they'd rather be building pyramids. Her makeup is flawless. Kohl around the eyes, carmine on the lips. But she refuses to open her mouth. Heezy, Ra approaches like a seasoned negotiator, coaxing her jaws open with a blend of charm and strong peppermint oil. Her complaint: a loose cap on her upper incisor. You lean in to peek and nearly choke on your own breath. It's a tiny plate of hammered gold, fixed over what looks like a decaying peg. Heezy. Ra examines it closely, muttering about last season's resin. He prees it off with surgical calm and applies a new mixture. Resin from acacia, a touch of beeswax, and possibly a drop of honey for flavor. He reseats the cap and tells her to avoid chewing on crocodile jerky. She laughs. You blink, nobility are weird. As she departs, Hazy Ra sighs. Too much wine, he mumbles. Too many figs. A note is added to the ivory token box. Just a carved banana. You choose not to ask. Next in line is a fisherman with sunburnt skin and a smile like broken pottery. He winces as he speaks, explaining you assume that sand has worn down his back teeth. This makes sense. Bread in Egypt isn't soft and fluffy. It's stone, textured and sprinkled with enough grit to build a wall. You nod sympathetically and hand Hazy Ra a strip of linen. He swabs the man's mouth, hums a bit, then dabs a paste that smells like burnt garlic onto the sore gum. The man sighs with relief, or passes out. Hard to tell. You ask, cautiously, if they ever used splints or braces. Hizzy. Ra looks at you like you've asked if fish can play the harp. Then he rummages through a basket and shows you something fascinating. Braided flax cords with tiny bits of polished wood. Maybe they did have primitive retainers. Or maybe it's just an experimental fishing lure. Historians are still undecided. By noon, you're covered in charcoal dust, plant resin, and regret. Easy. Ra insists you learn how to fold a scroll properly. An art form, apparently. If done wrong, the papyrus splits and the sacred text ends up resembling dental confetti. During a break, he shows you his book, a set of boards bound with twine, etched with dental recipes. Remedies include everything from powdered cow horn to fermented melon rend. One particularly bold treatment involves bat guano and lotus sap. You read it twice. Then pretend you didn't. Suddenly, a teenage boy arrives, holding his face like it might fall off. His mother begs Heezy, Ra, for help. It's an abscess. Swollen, red, and angry. You back away. Heezy, Ra doesn't flinch. He prepares a poultice, honey, barley mash, and something he calls stone oil. He applies it gently, then uses a tiny drill made from flint and bowstring to release the pressure. You've never heard such a scream? You almost run, but then silence, the swelling eases. The boy breathes. Heezy. Ra places a cooling cloth on his head and nods once. The mother weeps with relief. Later, you ask, what was stone oil? He says it's a rare extract from desert flowers, soaked for weeks in sunlight. But it could also just be camel spit. You choose to believe in flowers. The day ends with a gentle hum from outside, the workers chanting as they return home. Inside, you tidy the tools and dust the scrolls. Heezy. Ra offers you a tiny cup of pomegranate wine. You drink it slowly, savoring the sour sweetness and feeling something ancient settle in your chest. He pats your shoulder. You did not faint, he says. High praise. You fall asleep that night wondering how many smiles he's fixed, how many jaws he's soothed, and how strange it is that someone carved into stone the words, "Great one of the dentists." You wake to the sound of chanting, low, rhythmic, and echoing through the stone corridors of Sakura like a heartbeat. The air is warm already, clinging to your skin as Heezy. Ra hands you a wet cloth scented with crushed mint and lotus. You smell like fear, he says. Again, high praise. Today, you're seeing the full setup of his clinic, or what passes for a dental office in 2600 BCE. It's part workshop, part shrine, part organized chaos. You follow Heezy. Ra as he points out the structure, 3 small chambers under a reed-thatched roof, each with a distinct purpose. One for consultations, one for procedures, one that's just a dark, quiet place where people sit and contemplate life without molars. The walls are painted with scenes of healing, stylized figures holding tools, opening mouths, and occasionally floating beside lotus blossoms for dramatic effect. One mural depicts a patient smiling mid-treatment. You're fairly certain that's propaganda. The floor is compacted earth, swept daily with a broom made from palm fronds. There's no sink. Instead, a clay jar filled with Nile water sits in the corner, next to a smaller one with strong, smelling herbs that double as mouthwash. If you ask for a rinse, prepare for what can only be described as eucalyptus mixed with existential dread. Heezy. Ra opens a wooden cabinet filled with pungent bundles, dried herbs, resin blocks, and folded linen strips. For pain, he explains, waving at a bundle of blue lotus buds. You nod as if you know what he means. Later, you'll find out those were mildly narcotic and used during particularly squeamish procedures. Ancient sedation, courtesy of nature, and zero regulations. The day's first patient is a reed boat builder with hands like cracked leather and the patience of a sandstorm. His complaint? Jaw tension and clicking sounds. TMJ, essentially, but no one's calling it that. Heezy palpates his jaw, checks alignment by having him bite on a carved wood peg, and prescribes chewing willow bark and sleeping on the left side. You start to suspect that half of ancient medicine is just very confident guesses. Between patients, you clean the treatment bench. It's made of flat limestone slabs and has a slight tilt for drainage, a grim feature when you realize what it drains. You wipe dried flecks of what you hope is old resin and not something more dental. The tools are set in a pattern that's part ritual, part efficiency. Always the same order. Always with a whispered invocation under hissy, Ra's breath. A boy around 10 arrives with visibly misaligned teeth. His father insists that Hezi, Ra, reshape the bite before the boy is sent to apprentice with a scribe. There's pressure here. Cosmetic, as well as medical. Apparently, bad teeth mean bad omens in high society. Hezi. Ra produces a set of shaped ivory splints. He fits one across the boy's upper gum and ties it in place with flax string. The boy winces but doesn't cry. Afterward, he's given a small stone amulet to wear, shaped like a falcon's head. For strength, Hezi Ra says, or maybe just distraction. You later learn that ancient Egyptian belief intertwined oral health with spiritual health. The mouth was a gateway, not just for food and breath, but for spells. If your mouth was diseased, maybe your words were too. Historians still argue whether Hisi, Ra's rituals were more religious than therapeutic, or if both were inseparable back then. In the back room, there's a curious item, a mirror polished from silver, warped and dented but still usable. You catch your reflection, wondering if your own teeth would have passed muster in this era. Probably not. Hazy, Ra catches you staring and chuckles. Still alive, he says. That's enough. Just before midday, a nervous priest arrives with a delicate problem, halitosis. Or as Hisi, Ra puts it, a tongue possessed by swamp spirits. The priest has tried chewing mint, rinsing with wine, even meditating while holding a lotus. Nothing helps. Hisi, Ra inspects his mouth, then nods knowingly. He brews a rinse of pomegranate rind, crushed mint, and sea salt. The priest gags. Hisi, Ra shrugs. Purification isn't always sweet. There's a moment of comic relief when a goat wanders into the clinic, attracted by the herb bundles. Hisi, Ra swats it away with a sandal and mutters something about sacrifices gone wrong. You and he share a rare laugh, the kind that makes your shoulders relax and the heat feel just a bit lighter. In the quiet that follows, Hisi. Ra takes a moment to show you his prized possession, a carved wooden box lined with strips of gold. Inside are samples, molars, canines, premolars, each with a story. This one, he says, lifting a jagged molar, belonged to a royal guard. Died with it still hurting. You're not sure if that's tragic or just very on brand for ancient dentistry. He shows you another, a tiny, smooth incisor, clearly from a child. This was the first I ever pulled, he says softly. You don't ask how long ago that was, but the reverence in his voice is unmistakable. Later, as the last patient leaves, you help Hazy, Ra sweep the floor, wash the instruments in river water, and re-wrap the herb bundles. The sun has dipped low, casting long golden rays across the clinic walls. You're sore, tired, and weirdly proud. Just before you leave, Hezi, Ra taps a small niche in the wall. Inside is a carved seal with his name and titles. You trace your fingers over the symbols. Great one of the dentists of the palace. Still sounds made up, but somehow earned. You sleep that night beneath the stars, not on your mat, but curled near the clinic's threshold. The scent of myrrh lingers, and somewhere nearby, someone dreams of pain-free teeth. You wake with a stiff neck and a fine layer of dust in your eyebrows. Side effects of napping on limestone. The morning air has that dry crispness that tricks you into thinking today might be cooler. It won't be. Sakara is already humming merchants hawk dried fish. Priests chant morning prayers, and somewhere a goat, probably the same one it, is trying to eat a sandal. Inside the clinic, Hezi, Ra is already busy, sharpening an obsidian blade against a sandstone slab with the same nonchalance most people reserve for peeling fruit. Today, he says, is Tooth Day, which you quickly learn is every day. The first patient arrives wrapped in layers despite the heat. An older woman from the fields, face drawn and eyes watery. Her husband helps her sit, explaining through broken phrases and grimaces that she hasn't slept in 3 nights. She's clutching her jaw. You know that look? It's the same expression you wore the last time you bit into a frozen date and saw your life flash before your eyes. Hezi, Ra inspects her mouth. and confirms what you're both thinking: a severe molar abscess, maybe aggravated by chewing too much grit-laden bread. The Nile's gift of fertile soil comes with a cost. Sand and everything, especially food. Even with the best intentions, Egyptian bread includes stone, dust from the grinding process. Historians note that it's one of the biggest contributors to dental erosion in ancient times. And boy, do you see it here. He applies a hot poultice made from mashed garlic, fermented barley, and warm honey. The woman hisses in pain, but then slowly calms as the mixture begins to work. You offer her a damp cloth, and she actually manages a half smile. Or a grimace, but in Saqqara, those are pretty much interchangeable. Next comes a farmer who insists a demon has cursed his teeth. He points to his jaw and then to a dead beetle he's brought as evidence. Ra listens patiently, takes the beetle, and sets it on a ledge as if preparing it for trial. Then he gestures for you to bring the drill. Now, let's be clear, drill is a generous term. It's essentially a flint tip attached to a small bough, like a kid's toy that no one should ever put in their mouth. But that's exactly what happens. The man reclines on the bench, clutching a reed doll for comfort. You hold a small oil lamp close for light, very close, maybe too close. The flame flickers in the man's wide eyes. Ra sets to work, using the bow to gently grind through what's likely an infected enamel pocket. There's no numbing agent, just prayers, sweat, and the occasional deep, primal groan from the patient. You try not to make eye contact, or vomit, but then it's done. Ra packs the cavity with a blend of crushed herbs and a sticky pine resin. The farmer sits up, blinks once, then mutters something about the demon leaving through his ear. You're pretty sure that's not anatomically accurate, but hey, placebo is powerful. During a break, Ra tells you a story once. A nobleman came in with a mouth so foul, even the cats refused to sleep near him. The man believed he had swallowed a cursed spirit while sleeping. Ra treated him with a rinse made of pomegranate wine and burnt onion skins, and then told him to stop eating dried eels before bed. He improved. Ra shrugs. Or the cats just gave up. By midday, you've seen 5 more cases. One woman with receding gums, treated with salt and aloe. A child with a chipped tooth from wrestling. You suggest he wrestle with his mouth closed next time. And a merchant complaining of phantom pain, where a tooth used to be. Ra listens to his woes and prescribes chewing licorice root. You think he just likes the smell of licorice. Fringe theories swirl around these treatments. Some say ancient Egyptians believed the pain was due to tooth worms. A common belief for centuries, not just here. There's no evidence Ra believed in worms exactly, but he did burn certain herbs near the mouth, while muttering incantations. Historians still argue whether these rituals were genuine medicine or a blend of psychology and spectacle. Late in the day, a woman arrives carrying a pouch of barley. She doesn't want treatment. She wants proof that her neighbor cursed her teeth. You step back. Ra sighs. He accepts the barley, shakes it, smells it, then performs a brief chant over a small fire. Then, dramatically, he declares the barley clean. No curse, just starch and superstition. She leaves looking relieved and slightly annoyed. Probably disappointed her theory didn't pan out. As the sun sets, you help organize the instruments. You've learned their names: the splitter, the hook of Ra, the sweet scoop, and the death spoon. Okay, you made up that last one, but it feels right. You ask Ra how he learned all this. He simply says, "My master had no teeth. I learned fast." You laugh, until you realize he's probably serious. Outside, the village is quieter now. Shadows stretch long across the courtyard, and the air smells like baked stone and evening fires. You sit beside Ra, the two of you sipping sour beer from clay cups, watching the horizon blur into night. Your jaw aches in sympathy for every patient you saw today, and yet, there's something comforting about this ancient grind. This steady, purposeful fixing of the human condition, one aching tooth at a time. The next morning, before the sun even considers showing up, Heezy, Ra drags you out of bed and into the cool shadows of a temple courtyard. You rub your eyes, wondering if he's suddenly decided to turn spiritual. Turns out, he hasn't. It's just time for the monthly mouth blessing ceremony. He leads you through columns etched with gods and symbols, falcons, ankhs, serpents coiling through glyphs that pulse with faint meaning. The air here is thicker, more reverent. Heezy, Ra carries a bundle of herbs and a tiny clay idol shaped like a lion with its mouth open wide. The mouth of Ma'at, he whispers. Truth begins here. Which, to be honest, sounds like a dentist's motivational poster. You kneel beside him as temple priests chant slow, looping hymns. A brazier burns with frankincense, and the smoke swirls in lazy, hypnotic arcs. The scent is sweet, almost numbing, and you feel yourself swaying a bit as Hazy. Ra dips his fingers into a basin of blue, tinted water. He touches his lips, then yours, then mutters a line in Old Egyptian that definitely doesn't translate to, "You've got spinach in your teeth." You learn that this ceremony, part medical, part mystical, is believed to purify the mouth for honest speech and bodily health. The ancient Egyptians weren't just worried about rot and pain. They thought the mouth could carry spiritual disease, too. In the afterlife, your heart is weighed against a feather of truth, but your mouth, it testifies on your behalf. Better hope it's not full of abscesses when that moment comes. A fringe belief, found in the less official scrolls Heezy, Ra keeps rolled behind his sleep mat, suggests that specific gods control different teeth. Bastet governs canines, naturally, since cats bite eat. Thoth watches the molar's wisdom teeth, get it? And some say Set, the chaos god, hides in cavities. You're not sure what to do with that, so you avoid chewing on the left for the rest of the day. After the ceremony, Heezy returns to his clinic with a renewed sense of purpose. You'd hope maybe this was a day off, but no. There's already a line forming. One woman clutches her cheek and swears she saw Horus in her dream, telling her to stop eating river figs. Another man holds a cracked incisor and demands Hizzy. Ra bless it back into place. You're beginning to suspect that being a dentist in ancient Egypt means dealing with spiritual drama as often as dental decay. Today's highlight is a very minor royal, some cousin of someone who once poured wine for the pharaoh's cat. He arrives on a litter, dripping with linen and attitude. His problem? A stained front tooth, possibly from too much date wine or chewing henna leaves for fun. Heezy, Ra does not rush. He inspects the tooth with slow deliberation, then pulls out a mixture of ground pumice, goat milk, and beetle shell. He begins to gently polish the tooth with a linen wrap, humming as he works. You assist by keeping the noble distracted, mostly by pretending to be fascinated with his sandals. The result is actually impressive. The tooth shines faintly, purely and smooth. The noble smiles, preens in a copper mirror, and drops a small bronze token in Hezi, Ra's dish. "For your temple," he says. Heezy, Ra does not correct him. Back at the scroll cabinet, you help transcribe today's treatments. You're getting better at this. The hieroglyph for tooth is becoming second nature, and you've started inventing your own shorthand for more complicated diagnoses. You sketch a little sad face next to a particularly gnarly case. Heezy? Ra sees it, nods in approval, and adds a tiny X for extraction. By midday, the sun is an oppressive weight overhead, and the clinic smells like resin and cooked sand. You duck into the cool back room, hoping for a moment's rest, and find Heezy, Ra lighting incense before a shelf of carved statues, one of Sekhmet, lion, headed goddess of healing, another of Tauret, the hippo-shaped protector of children, and, oddly, dental patients too. He tells you a story of a young girl once brought to him, with a jaw so swollen it looked like a second face. He treated her not with tools, but by chanting over her water for 7 days. On the 8th day, the swelling vanished. Belief is powerful, he says. You nod, unsure if he means hers or his Historians still debate whether these healing stories were placebo, luck, or just skilled guesswork dressed up in incense and divine names. But there's no doubt that these rituals gave people comfort. And comfort, in a world where most medicine is improvised, torture matters. Later, a local brewer shows up with a simple request: clean his teeth before festival day. Apparently, fresh breath pairs well with fermented wheat dancing. Easy. Ra agrees, prepares a scrub of salt, mint, and vinegar, and gets to work. The man winces, but when he leaves, his grin is wide and only slightly bloodstained. As the day winds down, you and Hizzy Ra sit in the temple courtyard again. The statue of Maat glows orange in the sunset, her feathered headdress casting long shadows on the stone. You wonder aloud if anyone will remember Hesi, Ra, after he's gone. He chuckles. They carved my name in stone. It'll outlive your bones. And you know he's right. Somewhere, thousands of years from now, someone will stumble upon a stele that reads, Chief of Dentists, and wonder, what kind of man stared into mouths for a living and dared to call it sacred? By now, the rhythm of your days in Sakura is oddly comforting. Wake with the sun, sweep dust off stone, maybe yank a tooth or two. But today, Heezy, Ra gives you a knowing glance and simply says, time to learn the drill. You really hope that's not literal. Spoiler, it is. He leads you into the back chamber, the one with better ventilation and a very ominous oil lamp flickering in the corner. It casts long shadows over a bench lined with jars of mysterious substances and instruments you swear weren't there yesterday. One of them looks like a slingshot got into a fight with a corkscrew. Your job today? Assist in your first hands on procedure. The patient is already reclining on the limestone bench. A man in his 30s, muscular, sun-worn, and definitely regretting breakfast. He moans softly, one hand gripping his jaw. Easy. Ra leans in, mutters an incantation you recognize from the mouth, blessing, and then turns to you with the calm authority of someone who's done this 1,000 times and only fainted once. You prep the tools, trying to remember what's for cutting, what's for packing, and what's for emergency exorcism. Because that's on the table today too. The man's family insists the pain is due to a jealous spirit from a rival granary. You don't argue. You just hand over the resin. Easy. Ra uses his favorite piece of equipment, a small hand bow drill with a flint tip. It looks like something a child would make out of frustration and rope, but in the hands of Egypt's premier dentist, it hums with precision. The patient's head is gently secured with linen wraps, and a polished stone is placed under his neck to stabilize the jaw. Then comes the moment. Easy. Ra begins the drill. It makes a horrible noise, not loud, but gritty, primal, the sound of stone violating tooth. The man groans. You keep your eyes open because blinking feels like betrayal. The bow moves back and forth, flicking with an elegance you didn't expect. And slowly, a tiny cavity in the man's molar is widened just enough to remove what Hezi, Ra calls, bad blood. There's no anesthesia, only blue lotus oil, rubbed on the gums, maybe numbing, maybe not. You can't tell if the man's tears are from pain or relief. Possibly both. Once the drilling ends, Hezi, Ra cleans the cavity with wine, soaked cloth, then applies a paste made of ground barley, fig sap, and something from a pot marked with a beetle symbol. Secret blend. He whispers. You don't ask. Historians still argue whether Hezi, Ra invented the filling, or simply adapted methods from stonework. Some ancient skulls do show signs of drilled teeth with residue inside. Evidence, perhaps, of early dental fillings. Was it medical, magical, or both? No one agrees. But watching it happen in real time, you're amazed at how efficient and, dare you say, gentle it all seems. If you ignore the screaming, afterward, the patient is given a small jade bead to chew gently to remind the jaw who's in charge. Hasty, Ra says. The man thanks him, then thanks the gods, then thanks you. You pretend not to hear, because you're too busy trying not to pass out. You step outside for air and spot an older man waiting with what appears to be a molar wrapped in linen. It fell out during breakfast. He explains. I want it back in. You blink at him. He's serious? Hizzy. Ra agrees to reattach it spiritually and buries the tooth in the courtyard under a small offering stone. Sometimes people just want closure, he says. In the afternoon, a case arrives that pushes your nerves even further. A young boy with 2 broken front teeth. The result of a chariot race involving neither chariots nor adults. Hizzy. Ra doesn't scold. He simply grinds smooth the jagged enamel with a sandstone slab and applies a balm made from aloe honey and cooled clay. The boy winces but stays quiet. When it's over, Hezi, Ra presses a small carved amulet into his hand. For courage, he says. And maybe to stop running into pillars. Later, while boiling tools in a pot of wine and sans ancient sterilization, apparently, you ask if Hezi, Ra, has ever had a patient die during treatment. He nods once. Old man. Deep rot. Infection got to the blood. You pause. Did it scare you? He shrugs. Pain scares me more. Death is just quiet. That sticks with you. So does the realization that even with bronze tools and mystical herbs, ancient dentistry wasn't so different from today's. It's still about pain, prevention, and convincing people not to use their teeth as nutcrackers. As the sun lowers, painting the clay walls with gold and orange, you clean the last of the tools and lay out tomorrow's herb mixes. Easy. Ra watches you, then quietly places his hand on your shoulder. You did not drop the drill, he says. Another victory. You lie awake that night. The image of the bow drill still spinning behind your eyes, it was terrifying, but also beautiful in that way ancient things sometimes are. Equal parts ritual. Craftsmanship and raw human need. And tomorrow, there will be more teeth. By the time dawn stretches its pale fingers over Sakura, you've already swept the courtyard twice and reorganized the herbal bundles by smells bad and smells worse. Hizi Rai emerges with a look that says, today will be long. And it is, because today you deal with the not so hidden truth of ancient Egypt oral inequality. Your first patient is a servant girl, probably 14, who arrives barefoot and nervous. Her gums are visibly inflamed, her teeth blackened near the roots. She keeps her mouth half covered with her shawl. You guide her gently to the stone bench, and Hezi, Ra begins his examination. Too much coarse bread. He murmurs, lifting her lip with a linen-wrapped finger. And no rinsing. He prepares a rinse from vinegar and date seed ash, something acidic enough to strip barnacles off a ship. She winces. Then he carefully scrapes Plake with a bronze hook that looks more like a fish scaler. When it's over, she thanks you both and leaves with a cloth pouch of mint, leaves for chewing. She doesn't pay. She can't. But Hizzy, Ra nods as if her thanks were currency. Not even an hour later, a new arrival announces himself with sandal thumps and the scent of imported perfume. An elite scribe in blue linen, flanked by 2 attendants, enters holding a silk, wrapped jaw diagram. He complains of mild discoloration on his lower incisors. Shadow I cannot abide, he says with a grimace, as though he's being actively devoured by shame. You prepare the pumice paste, ground oyster shell, and pearl dust mixed with a touch of honey, and help apply it using a fine linen strip. It smells faintly of wealth and absurdity. Heezy, Rai works methodically, then finishes by applying a light rub of myrrh oil for sheen. You glance between the 2 cases. One girl with infected gums, one man with vanity complaints, and can't help noticing the difference in materials, technique, and even mood. For the elite, dentistry is a luxury spa. For the poor, it's battlefield trage. Hezi, Ra seems unbothered. All mouths are different temples, he says cryptically, while rinsing his hands in rose water. You start to understand that he's not judging. It's just how the world works. Historians still argue how equitable medical care really was in ancient Egypt. Some scrolls suggest state-sponsored physicians were available to all, but archaeological evidence hints that the rich had better tools, better drugs, and far fewer reasons to chew on gravel. Class determined care, and the teeth didn't lie. Later in the day, a merchant brings his son for a consultation. The boy's front teeth are coming in crooked. The father is horrified. "He can't be seen like this," he says. "Not during festival season."
Easy.
Ra produces a curious device, a thin gold wire and 2 carved wooden pegs. He fashions a kind of early brace, using beeswax to affix the wire behind the teeth. You're amazed. It's primitive, yes, but the logic tracks. Gentle pressure aesthetics. Function. When the family leaves Hasey, Ra mutters, by Ra's beard, they're worried about smiles now. You suspect he remembers when people were just grateful to keep their molars past 20. In the lull that follows, a priest drops by, not for treatment, but to deliver a scroll about mouth hierarchies. Apparently, there's now a ranking system among temple acolytes based on oral perfection. You try not to laugh, but then you remember that modern influencer culture isn't much different. Tooth envy transcends time. A younger boy appears next, barefoot, carrying a woven basket of onions. He smiles shyly, revealing exactly 2 teeth and a lot of space. "My sister says I whistle when I talk," he admits. Heezy Ra squints, then tells him, "Whistling mouths speak truths others miss." The boy beams. "No procedure today, just a compliment and a few stalks of lemongrass for chewing." That night, you help restock the herb jars. Maror, mint, anise, barley husk. You notice something: the better treatments, the ones that smell sweeter, feel gentler, or look shinier. Those are stored in labeled jars with ornate lids. The rougher stuff, it's in plain clay pots. You ask Hizzy, Ra, if he thinks it's fair. He pauses, then says, "Fair? No. But balance is the job of Ma'at, not mine." He pats your shoulder and adds, "I give what I have, when I can. That's the work." You sit under the stars, the air warm and quiet, thinking of smiles, crooked, polished, stained, missing, and the strange status they carry. Hisi, Rai is already asleep, curled near the sandalwood fire, but his tools glint softly in the moonlight, equal in rest, if not in use. You start the day rubbing sleep from your eyes and wondering if Hizzy Ra ever takes a vacation. The man is already grinding herbs with a stone pestle like it's a competitive sport. You ask if today's going to be another round of molars and mirror. He shakes his head and grins. "Today we do everything. Turns out, Hazy, Ra's resume is longer than the Nile and flood season. Sure, he's chief of dentists, but he's also scribe of the royal house, overseer of healing, and, wait for it, supervisor of sacred rites." You begin to suspect he just kept saying yes until someone carved it into a stele. First up, a scroll transcription. A royal assistant arrives with a brittle roll of papyrus and instructions to copy it. Exactly. No missing dots or stylized inks. Heezy adorns his scribe gear, a fine reed pen, a paint palette with red and black ink, and a concentration so intense you could probably pull his tooth and he wouldn't blink. You sit beside him, trying to follow along. The symbols dance in your mind. Some you recognize: a tooth, mouth, priest. Others are artistic chaos. You think one might just be a guy holding bread and crying. Historians still argue whether Hezi Ra wrote original medical texts or simply preserved others' knowledge. Some believe he compiled one of the earliest health treatises, though no full copy has survived. What's certain is that he was a man of many talents, and that multitasking was his normal. By mid-morning, he's shifting hats, figuratively, to oversee a minor surgical procedure. A soldier from the palace guard has a boil near his temple, dangerously close to the jaw. Not exactly dental, but close enough. Easy. Ra sets up his surgical kit, which honestly looks like a fishing tackle box designed by a sadist, and gets to work. You assist, handing over the obsidian blade while trying not to gag at the smell of roasted garlic poultice. He makes a swift incision, drains the site, and packs it with salt, soaked linen. The soldier grunts. You flinch. Hisi Ra hums a hymn to Hathor like he's just patching a sandal. Afterwards, you both cleans in the courtyard with oil and river water, standard post, surgery scrub down. A passing priest gives you both a respectful nod. which is either approval or a reminder to pay temple taxes. Before lunch, there's a ceremony at the necropolis, and, surprise, Hissy, Rai is leading it. Why? Because he's also the local mortuary coordinator. You ask if that means he does funerals. Sometimes. He replies, but mostly I supervise jaw positioning. You stare. Mouths must be at peace in the afterlife. He explains. You cannot speak truth with clenched teeth. You walk with him to the edge of the burial grounds. The tomb is modest, decorated with family symbols and a small statue of Tauret, the protective hippo goddess. The body lies on a reed mat, mouth open slightly, face serene. Heezy, Ra gently adjusts the jaw, places a tiny cone of scented wax near the lips, and whispers a farewell. He invites the family to place offerings near the mouth: dried figs, barley bread, and a tiny wooden toothpick carved with symbols of clarity. Speak well in the land of the dead, he intones. Be known by your words. It's unexpectedly beautiful. Back at the clinic, you find a line has formed. Words gotten out. Hazy, Ra fixed a boil, blessed a mouth, and now people want him to interpret dreams, and maybe look at their cats. One man insists his molar contains a tiny scarab. You gently explain that it's tartar. He's not convinced. By afternoon, Hizzy, Ra is repairing a scroll rack that collapsed in the night. You offer help, but he waves you off. Used to be a carpenter too, he says. Of course he was. He tells you about his youth, learning under a healer who used crocodile dung as sunscreen and claimed he could pull pain from the gums by humming. He wasn't wrong, Easy Ra muses. He was just loud. One quirky detail you pick up in Hissy: Ra keeps a personal amulet shaped like a molar. He claims it was a gift from a patient who bit a lion and lived. You don't question it. Historians love Hissy, Ra's tombstone, because it's one of the earliest that lists multiple professions. Some scholars think he's a prototype for the Egyptian ideal. A wise man, healer, scribe, and spiritual guide. Others think he was just really good at marketing. You end the day copying a passage that reads, "The mouth is the gate of life. If it fails, so does the soul." It's written in deep black ink, flanked by symbols of food, speech, and stars. You can't help but think of modern dentists in sterile offices, unaware they share a legacy with this sand-covered sage. As the stars emerge, you help Hizzy, Raleigh, at a row of oil lamps. He sits cross-legged, watching the flames flicker in a line. Teeth, he says, almost to himself, tell the truth more often than people do. And then he closes his eyes. Another job done. Another life eased. Today begins with a quiet reverence. You can feel it in the way Hasey moves. Slower, more thoughtful. He wears a fresh linen robe, newly pressed with careful pleats, and his hair is oiled neatly back. You follow him without question, sensing something significant in the air. He leads you away from the clinic, past the dusty alleys and slow, moving donkey carts, toward the edge of the necropolis, the city of the dead. This time, it's not for a patient or a blessing. It's for him. I've begun preparing my tomb, he says, matter-of-factly, as if discussing a shopping list. You blink. Too many teeth behind me now. I'd rather carve the stones myself than let some priest guess. The location is modest but meaningful, a slight rise overlooking the path to the step pyramid of Djoser, where shadows stretch long in the afternoon light. Heezy Ra points to where his chamber will be, sun facing dry and built to last. Good teeth should outlive the gums that held them. He adds with a small smirk. You help him unload small carved boxes from a donkey cart. Each contains grave goods, items he wants entombed with him when the time comes. There's the expected amulets, scrolls, vials of powdered herbs, but then there are the curious items: a finely carved ivory toothpick, a stone drill head worn smooth from use, a tiny, slightly crooked wooden molar painted with gold leaf. You realize he's memorializing his career, not as a warrior or a priest, but as a caretaker of mouths, a restorer of smiles, a man who faced pain and made it smaller. Among the goods is his most prized stele, a tall slab of limestone engraved with hieroglyphs so precise they feel alive. You help prop it upright in the sun. At the top, Hezi, Ra, great one of the dentists of the palace. Beneath that, an unblinking eye, a reed pen, and a stylized open mouth. One line reads, "Hey, who soothed the voice, who eased the bite, who made the breath sweet before the gods." You try not to tear up, you fail. Historians cherish this stele, not just because it mentions dentistry, but because it's one of the earliest to emphasize a person's profession over their rank. It marks a cultural shift where skills, not just bloodlines, begin to shape legacy. That little detail, monumental. While resting beside the tomb pit, Hezi, Ra tells you a story from early in his career. There was a noble who died with a rotted jaw. No one would bury him. They feared his soul would poison the earth. So Hezi, Ra cleaned the mouth, packed it with herbs, and whispered apologies on behalf of the man to the gods. And when they buried him, the earth accepted him. No tremors. No floods. He shrugs. Maybe coincidence. Maybe a clean mouth is a clean conscience. As the afternoon heat builds, workers begin to chisel the tomb's interior blocks. You help sketch a few guiding glyphs, his titles, his dates, and his personal motto. Truth in words, clarity in breath. One fringe item is tucked into a corner of the tomb, a ceramic jar filled with old patient tokens, small ivory markers, each etched with a glyph or symbol, like the ones from the clinic's box. You pick one up. It reads, "Widow Broken Tooth gave thanks." Another, "Boy, brave, bit tool." This is his real record. Not just a ledger of pain, but of resilience. A community written in enamel and nerve. At sunset, Hezi, Ra lays out incense in a small brazier and lights it with flint. The scent of myrrh, cinnamon, and blue lotus fills the air. He whispers a short prayer. "May my teeth rest, as my words still echo." You sit beside him as the sky shifts to indigo, then velvet black. The stars above blink slowly into view, each a pinhole in the ceiling of eternity. He hands you something, then a carved figurine in the shape of a smiling mouth. "For you," he says, "to remember that healing begins here. Later, you'll help pack more offerings, flax linens, jars of lotus honey, a wax tablet etched with dental diagrams. You'll record his wishes, down to the herbs he once placed near his skull. But for now, you sit together, in silence, beside a half-built tomb that already hums with memory. The sand is warm beneath you, the night peaceful. And beside you, a man who once pulled pain from jaws and dared to call it sacred, prepares to leave behind not just bones, but legacy. You wake to the scent of burning reeds and bitter herbs, not unpleasant, just pungent enough to say, "Get up, there are mouths to bless." But today, Hezi, Ra seems unusually relaxed, almost cheerful. "Time for myths," he says. "Let's talk about what they believed, not just what we did." He unrolls a scroll from the temple library, one of the older ones, the kind where the ink has faded to the color of dried blood. "We'll call this the Book of Sweet Breath," he explains. "It's not official, but it's popular." The first line reads, "If the teeth rot, the words spoil. And when the words spoil, the gods turn away." Dramatic, sure. But if you've smelled old barley breath, you get it? Ancient Egyptians believed that breath wasn't just a physical thing, it was spiritual currency. Fresh breath meant favor from the gods. Bad breath, that meant sin, illness, or worse, moral decay. So naturally, they developed rituals, treatments, and what can only be described as oral superstitions. Take the 7 chews, for example. According to one tale, chewing 7 specific things: lotus stem, papyrus reed, fresh date, fish scale, gross, mint root, a single clove of garlic, and a pebble from the temple floor, would purify the breath for a full moon cycle. You try chewing 2 and nearly choke. Hezi, Ra just chuckles. "You skipped the fish, didn't you?" Another myth says that the god Thoth invented writing and the toothbrush. Fringe, sure, but charming. It's depicted in one mural where Thoth holds a scribe's palette in one hand, and what looks suspiciously like a frayed stick in the other. Scholars argue about that one. Was it a writing brush or an early miswak? You decide to believe both. Why not? Then there's the tale of Queen Nefret, who allegedly cured a court plague of bad breath by standing on a balcony and spitting mint-infused wine over the crowd. Completely implausible. But there is a festival in her name celebrated every summer, where people rinse their mouths with wine and chant, "Nefret cleanses!" You'd say it's bonkers, but modern folks buy charcoal toothpaste and call it innovation. So Hizzy opens a wooden box filled with carved charms. Each is shaped like a tooth mouth or tongue, and each has a specific function. One to prevent tooth grinding, one to restore the sweetness of a lie, one, your favorite, to silence gossip by sealing the jaw with kindness, probably underoozed. These charms were often worn around the neck, especially by speakers, priests, and, yes, professional mourners. Crying all day, you'd better have breath that doesn't scare off the soul. Hazy, Ra says. You laugh, but then he shows you a real amulet, found buried with a singer. It's shaped like a tiny harp with a mouth in the center. Historians have traced dozens of these oral-related charms, some of which were even placed in the tombs of the dead. The thinking was, if your mouth wasn't ready to speak to the gods, your heart might be misjudged. The mouth had to be open, healthy, and presentable, and this is where things get curious. Some scrolls suggest certain words could only be spoken with clean teeth, literally. That the alignment of your molars affected pronunciation, and thus the spell's success. One particularly strange belief said that lost teeth had to be buried under a statue of Ma'at to ensure your afterlife voice remained whole. Easy. Ra shows you a burial figurine, a tiny stone priest with a single hole in his jaw. To absorb the lost teeth of the dead, he says. It's symbolic, but comforting. You begin to see how deeply oral health was woven into everything. Faith, status, even love. There are love poems from the era praising white teeth as metaphors for moonlight purity and honesty. One reads, her mouth like lotus blooming. Her teeth, 32 blessings. You check your own. One's a little crooked. You feel mildly insulted. Midday, a patient arrives, an older man with worn down canines and a bone bead necklace shaped like tongues. He's not here for a treatment. He wants a spell to protect his words. Easy. Raya obliges, lighting incense and reciting a verse that involves lotus sap, papyrus smoke, and a whisper into the man's open mouth. Is it medicine? Is it theater? Maybe both. But when the man leaves, he walks taller. He believes. And sometimes belief is the balm. You finish the day helping organize Hesi, Ra's personal collection of myths, many of which are written on tiny scrolls, others on ostraca, shards of pottery etched with looping glyphs. One tells of a crocodile who offered his teeth to save a dying fisherman. In return, the gods granted him the power to bite through lies. That night, as stars pepper the velvet sky, hissy, Ra leans back on his reed mat and says, mouths matter, because what comes out of them can build cities or burn bridges. You fall asleep thinking of molar-shaped charms, peppermint goddesses, and the oddly beautiful idea that maybe, just maybe, the way we care for our breath says more about our soul than our scent. You're deep in the kitchen district of Memphis today, tagging along with Hisi, Ra on what he calls a culinary consultation, which, in plain terms, means checking what people are eating and how badly it's wrecking their teeth. You're excited until you see what's for breakfast. First stop, a baker's stall. A crowd has gathered for warm loaves fresh from the oven. You get a chunk handed to you, steaming and dense. At first bite, it's delicious, earthy, nutty, sweetened faintly with dates. Then comes the crunch. Not a delightful crust crunch. No, a literal crunch of sand and stone. You discreetly spit into your palm. Stone ground flour. Hizi, Ra says dryly. Very literal. This is the great paradox of Egyptian cuisine. Blessed by the Nile, cursed by its grit. Because the flour was ground between stone querns Tiny flecks of quartz and granite found their way into almost every bite. Tasty. Yes. Tooth safe. About as safe as chewing pottery. As you chew more cautiously, Hezi, Ra points out several children gnawing on dried fish tails like licorice. They love the crunch, he says. I love the cavities. Historians have found that nearly every ancient Egyptian skull examined shows significant dental wear. The culprit? Not sugar, though that played a part, but the constant, inescapable abrasion of food mixed with fine sand. Over time, it didn't just erode enamel. It exposed nerves, inflamed gums, and left people walking around with smiles that whispered pain. In hieroglyphs, you stop at a market stall next. A woman sells honey-drenched locusts, yes, actual locusts, and offers you one for strength. You decline politely. Easy, Ra takes one, bites, and nods. Too sweet, he says. Chavity candy. He then shows you an old trick, chewing licorice root. Egyptians believed it freshened the breath, but it also reduced sugar's acidic assault. Still not as good as rinsing, he mutters, but they won't give up the honey. Lunch takes you to a noble's estate. You sit at a servant's bench while hissy. Ra inspects the leftovers from a feast. Wine, figs, roasted duck, barley cakes with raisins. Sounds divine until you examine the damage. Sticky fruits, he explains, lifting a gnawed fig core. They love hiding in molars. You assist him in inspecting a young house servant who's been complaining of gum bleeding. The girl opens her mouth, and sure enough, her molars are packed with fig pulp hardened into a sugar tomb. Easy. Ra applies a salt rub and tells her to rinse with vinegar and mint. She nods, grimaces, and scurries off. In the corner, a little boy is trying to pry open a pomegranate with his teeth. You intervene just in time. That's how you lose an incisor. You mutter. He doesn't understand your words, but your horrified face gets the message. Later, at the butcher's stall, you witness another culprit, dried meat. Tough, chewy, and often left to sit in the sun until it's basically leather. Easy, Ra explains that people who ate more meat had stronger jaws, but also more cracked teeth. Chew like a jackal, break like one, he says. As the sun peaks, you retreat to a shaded corner and sip a mixture of beer and water. Egypt's Gatorade. Mildly alcoholic, yes, but safer than plain river water. Easy, Ra tells you that some patients rinse with beer. You don't recommend it. Then there's the odd myth that chewing date pits keeps teeth strong. You try it. It's like biting into gravel dipped in disappointment. But the logic, possibly sound. Date pits are mineral, rich, and mildly abrasive. Perhaps too abrasive. It's like sandpaper for your enamel. Easy, or shrugs. One strange but fringe fact. Some scrolls claim pharaohs avoided sweet fruits before public speeches to prevent sticky tongue. You picture Ramses spitting out a fig backstage, and it's oddly humanizing. By late afternoon, you return to the clinic with a small satchel of food samples. Easy. Ra catalogs them by damage level. The soft barley cake gets a neutral rating. Dried figs, gum glue, dried eel tail, dental terror. He prepares a lecture scroll titled The Teeth of the Market and asks you to draw a small cartoon molar next to each food type. You gladly oblige. Your illustration of a locust with a toothache gets a chuckle. That evening, he teaches you how to craft a basic mouth rinse from mint, vinegar, and crushed charcoal. Better than wine, he says. You agree, reluctantly. You fall asleep with the day's flavors lingering in your memory: honey, grit, salt, regret. Ancient Egypt, for all its richness, was a dentist's nightmare wrapped in sweetness. But as you drift off, you can't help but admire how much thought they gave to something so small. Every bite, every chew, a piece of history, etched not on stone, but on enamel. This morning begins with something rare, a request from the temple. A high priest has summoned Hezi, Ra, to examine bones, specifically jawbones pulled from ancient tombs unearthed during a recent construction pause. You're not exactly sure what the priest expects. Maybe spiritual insight, maybe ancient dental gossip. Either way, you're intrigued. The temple chamber is cool and dark. with tall alabaster columns etched in symbols that watch you like silent judges. Laid out on a linen-covered slab are 3 skulls, each in various stages of decay, their jaws exposed, teeth yellowed with age, and strangely familiar. The first is clearly someone of high rank. The enamel is relatively intact, the wear minimal. Gold traces remain in 2 molars, a clear sign of early caps or at least ornamentation. He smiled at Court. Hasty, Ra murmurs. Probably got paid for it. He runs a finger gently along the gum line, then pauses. See that? He asks, pointing to a darkened pit in the bone. Cavity. Deep one. Likely hurt for years. You wince. That would have been unbearable, and yet here it is, fossilized like yesterday's lunch. You examine the second skull, much more worn. The jaw is crooked, teeth ground flat, as if the person had chewed stones for breakfast. Probably a laborer. Easy, Ra nods. Barley bread again. The great equalizer. He points to the molars, each one cracked or chipped. No fillings. No caps. Just grit and pain. Historians still argue whether Ra himself ever worked with these kinds of cases regularly. Some believe he was strictly for the elite, but these bones, laid side by side, suggest he knew all mouths, not just royal ones. Then comes the third skull. Smaller. Likely a child. Several baby teeth remain, 2 rotted almost to the root. Easy. Ra picks it up gently. No one helped this one, he says quietly. Or couldn't. You feel the weight of it. The loss. The anonymity. No titles, no honorifics, just a tiny jawbone and a story lost to time. The priest, watching from the shadows, steps forward. What do they tell you? He asks. Ra stands, wipes his hands on a linen cloth, and replies, They tell me we're the same now as then. We eat, we hurt, we speak. We're remembered by what remains of that. The priest nods solemnly and motions you both to follow. Down another corridor lies a locked chamber filled with even older remains. Here, among brittle bones and faded linen, are teeth from a time, even before Ra, pre-dynastic perhaps, no names, no records, just rows of worn, fossilized truth. One set draws his attention. The jaw is wide, with molars that show drill marks, small, perfect circles clearly carved with purpose. This, he whispers, this is before me. You look closer. The drilling is finer than anything you've seen. Not recent, but intentional. Historians still debate if Ra was truly the first dentist, or merely the first we recorded. This discovery tilts the scale. Someone else drilled teeth before names were etched in stone. Who taught them? You ask. Ra doesn't answer. He just rests a hand on the skull and closes his eyes. By midday, you return to the clinic, your mind buzzing with questions. What else have we missed? Who else healed in silence? There are no scrolls for those hands, no stele for those tools. But their work, painful, purposeful, precise, lives on in the very bones. Ra spends the afternoon quietly sketching. You peer over his shoulder and see diagrams of jaws, each labeled with glyphs like Grinder of Truths, Tongue's Guard, and Echo Vessel. He's categorizing teeth as if they were poetry. You offer to help. He hands you a palette and smiles. Color the pain. Later, an older man visits the clinic, not for treatment, but to share a story. He says his grandfather once told him of a healer who could read your future by looking at your bite. He told me I'd lose my wife and my first tooth the same week. The man laughs. He was half right. You spend the evening sorting tiny ceramic figurines Ra has collected, each shaped like mouths or teeth, some smiling, some missing pieces. One has a tongue sticking out, and you're told it wards off lies. Another is cracked perfectly down the center. This one reminds me, Ra says. Fix what you can. Accept what you can't. As stars rise above Sakura, you sit by the wall of the clinic, tracing the ancient symbols painted on its surface. You realize now, teeth don't just tell you what someone ate. They tell you who they were, how they lived, what they feared, and who remembered them. Bones don't lie. And neither do molars. The next morning, Ra is in a rare mood, quiet, pensive, and unusually slow to reach for his reed pen. He's seated by the stele in the courtyard, staring at the inscription that names him, Great One of the Dentists of the Palace, as if it suddenly feels premature. You sit beside him, and finally, he speaks. They say I'm the first, but someone had to pull the first tooth. He's not being modest. He's being honest. And it leads to the day's strange mission, retracing the whispers of those who might have come before him. The forgotten fixers of teeth, the unrecorded medics whose skills lived only in word of mouth, quite literally. He starts by pulling an old scroll from a hidden alcove behind the herb jars. It's crumbling and smells like mildew and soot. This, he says, is older than my teacher's teacher. It contains fragments of names, sketches of unfamiliar tools, and what may be the world's most poorly drawn molar. One name repeats to Jodi. A healer from the southern desert, mentioned in obscure hymns, said to have open jaws and silenced screams, but no stele, no tomb. Just passing reference? You travel south for the day, walking with Heezy, Ra and a hired scribe through reed-lined paths toward a smaller village near the cliffs. There, a sandstone wall bears a faded painting, a man bending over another's open mouth holding what appears to be, yes, a drill. It's not as fine as Hazy, Ra's, but the intention is clear. Treatment. He stares at it for a long time. This was before ink. Before order. He worked in pain, not titles. The scribe sketches the scene while you speak to locals. One elder tells you of a burial cave nearby, filled with old bones and jars. They say the healer of teeth came from there, she says. He pulled pain with bone tools and spoke to no gods, only to gums. Inside the cave, with torches flickering, you find fragments of jawbones with small, deliberate carvings. They're rough, but unmistakable early dental work. One has a hollow filled with resin, long hardened into amber. You carry the fragments back to Hazy, Ra. He examines them gently, reverently. Not me, he says, but one of mine. Historians today debate whether the title, First Dentist, truly belongs to Hazy, Ra, or if it's just that he was first to have it written down. Evidence of drilled teeth has been found in Mehrgar, in today's Pakistan, from around 7000 BCE, but the tools, the method, the intention, those remain fragmented puzzles. Was it truly dentistry, or was it ritual? And did those healers see themselves as medical practitioners, or spiritual intermediaries? Hizzy. Ra doesn't care about the title. Let others debate. He mutters, I care for pain. That is enough. Back in Sakura, he revises his tomb plans slightly, adds a small chamber to house tokens from others. Not his patients, but these earlier healers. You help place the jaw fragments in a linen pouch. It's a gesture, a salute across time. Later, a visiting scholar arrives. She's come to study Hizzy, Ra's methods, but he surprises her by showing her to Jodi's fragment instead. This, he says, is where I began. She's unimpressed. She wants names, date, status. He smiles. Let the bones speak. They do not lie. As the day ends, you find Hizzy, Ra painting a small image on the clinic wall. A silhouette of a healer crouched before a patient. It's simple. Just a few lines, but powerful. A reminder that history is written not just in scrolls and stone, but in intention, care, and wordless acts. You sit quietly beside him as the stars emerge. Do you think, you ask, someone will one day question you? He laughs softly. They should. That's how truth survives. And as the wind picks up, curling through Sakura's dusty alleys, you feel it too. The sense that this story is bigger than one man. That the legacy isn't in a title carved in limestone, but in every mouth that closed in peace, every pain that was eased, and every healer who worked in the flicker of firelight before names even mattered. The morning greets you with the gentle hush of linen, flapping in the wind, rows of white cloths, drying along the rooftops like sleepy sails. Sakura feels slower today, like the entire city knows something is drawing to a close. Hazy. Ra hands you a fresh reed pen and a palette with precise instructions. Paint my smile. At first, you think he's joking, but he holds perfectly still, mouth gently curved, eyes dancing with the hint of humor and defiance. Let history remember teeth, not only in pain. He adds. You begin sketching. A side profile first, capturing the line of his jaw, the slightly crooked incisor he never bothered to cap, and the quiet serenity that lives between his lips. He approves with a grunt. This artwork will be carved onto his final stele, a less formal one meant for the inner chamber of his tomb. He calls it the smile wall. You call it, internally, the first emoji. The workshop echoes with soft chisel sounds as artisans trace your design into limestone. Nearby, Heezy organizes jars of his legacy, his tools, his herbs, even the cloth he used to wipe his hands after procedures. No one remembers the wipe cloth. He chuckles. They should. He's also written a short text, which he calls his tooth wisdom. It includes such timeless gems as never use your teeth to open amphorae. Pain ignored becomes louder. A quiet patient lies. A loud one heals. You are not your breath, but people remember it. Later, you both walk through Saqqara's necropolis, where tombs nestle against hillsides like sleeping camels. Heezy stops at various stones, nodding at names scribes, priests, midwives. She healed stomachs, he says of one. He read dreams. And then, finally, a humble stone near the edgy. Hemet, who soothed feet? A podiatrist? Maybe. Or just someone with good hands and a bucket of ointment. Will you miss this? You ask as he studies his own tomb, now complete. No, he says, because I'm still here. He taps his teeth, until these rest. Back at the clinic, a patient arrives unexpectedly. A royal messenger with chipped enamel from biting too hard on a dried date seed. I had no idea they were that hard. He mutters, blushing. You assist with a quick polish and apply a paste of lime and oil of anise. He leaves whistling. Your final case, perhaps. A neat little bookend to this chapter. As the sun lowers, casting long gold across the temple stones, Hissy, Ra sits beneath his stele. His official one, already weather, worn despite its recent carving. You reread the words, great one of the dentists of the palace, opener of mouths, calmer of gums, he who left no jaw untouched. Sounds dramatic, you say. He shrugs. It's mostly true. That night, you light the lamps for the last time. The clinic glows warm and familiar, walls etched with glyphs, benches worn smooth by years of shifting bodies and nervous feet. You place the final scrolls in clay tubes, seal them with wax, and hang the small mouth-shaped charm Hizzy. Ra gifted you over the door. He joins you outside, where the wind smells like distant harvests. You've seen enough, he says. But there's more. You nod, knowing exactly what he means. The story won't end here. Because somewhere down the river, another jaw will ache, another healer will rise, and one day, another dreamer will stumble across a limestone stele with a grinning face and wonder, who was the man who thought fixing teeth mattered this much? The final morning is unusually quiet, not temple, quiet or sleepy village quiet, but the kind of hush that feels stitched into the air, like the city is holding its breath. You wake before the sun and find Hessie. We're already seated in the courtyard, not with tools, not with scrolls, but with a cup of barley water and a distant look in his eyes. He gestures for you to sit, and for the first time in weeks, there's no rush, no patience, no herbs to grind, no jaws to realign. Today, he says, you do, sort of. He walks with you one last time through the clinic, touching each object like a farewell. The obsidian blade, he spins it once in his fingers, then lays it gently into a linen wrap. The papyrus scrolls, he checks them for cracks and mold, then seals them in a clay urn. The small box of patient tokens, he counts them silently, smiling when he finds the one shaped like a fish. In the back room, you find the carved wooden molar again. You lift it. It feels heavier now. Maybe it always was. That afternoon, a small group gathers. Not a crowd, just a handful of people. Past patients, neighboring healers, the baker who once cracked her tooth on a fig pit, the noble who insisted on breath rituals before speeches. They've heard he's preparing to retire. They want to say thank you. There's no speech, no grand ceremony, just small gifts left quietly, a flower tucked into a basket of myrrh, a child's sketch of Dr. Tooth, a reed pen wrapped in gold thread. One woman even brings a pot of honey and a note that says, "For sweet words wherever you go." You find yourself blinking too much. As the sky dims and the day folds into dusk, Ra sits beside his tomb, now sealed, now ready. He leans against the stele that bears his name and tilts his head back to watch the first stars appear. "Promise me," he says, "you'll keep asking questions, even when the answers are just bone dust and tool marks." You nod. Then, as the wind picks up and the stars scatter wider across the night, he closes his eyes and whispers, "Let the mouths rest. Let the breath be quiet. Let the work be done." And with that, you lie down beside him, under the soft weight of history, surrounded by the gentle smells of incense and dried herbs, lulled by the knowledge that even the smallest crafts, quiet, exacting, often forgotten, can echo for thousands of years. You close your eyes. The tools are clean, the teeth are still, and the silence is warm. Now, as we drift away from the sandy corridors of Sequoia, the glow of oil lamps behind us, and the sound of distant flutes, barely a breath on the wind, let your mind rest with the memory of gentle hands and steady eyes. Let the image linger, of a man kneeling beside a limestone bench, easing the pain of strangers one tooth at a time, speaking not of glory, but of breath, of truth, of soft little miracles. Imagine the cool stone beneath your feet, the scent of crushed mint and river clay in the air. The wind wraps around you like linen, the stars flicker like ink dropped on a dark scroll. Everything slows. Even time feels softer here. Each tool has been wrapped, each scroll tucked away. The stele stands quiet, catching moonlight on its ancient smile. The clinic, now empty, still hums with presence, with the echoes of whispers, groans, laughter, and thanks. You are no longer the apprentice. You are simply resting in a world long gone, held gently by its memory. Let your jaw unclench. Let your breath slow. The ache, whatever it was, is fading now. There is nothing more to fix. Only sleep. Only calm. Only the hush of the past whispering you to stillness. Good night, and sweet dreams.